Behind the Red Line, Episode 25. The Alicia Walker Case. When a sex worker fights back. Chicago winters don't forgive much. The air cuts straight through your coat. Snow piles in dirty corners of parking lots. The sky hangs low and gray over the city, like it's pressing down on everyone who lives under it. On a freezing January morning in 2014, police in the quiet suburb of Orland Park forced open the door of a small, tidy home belonging to 61-year-old high school teacher Alan Phelan. He hadn't shown up to work for days. He wasn't answering calls. His co-workers were worried. What they found inside that house did not match the image anyone had of the man who lived there. It was a crime scene. On the kitchen floor, Phelan lay on his back, blood-dried, body still stab wounds scattered across his neck, torso, and arms. A neat Catholic school teacher with a secret life had died a violent death, and the person police would eventually blame was a 19-year-old sex worker from Ohio named Alicia Walker. To the state, she was a murderer. To sex worker rights organizers, a young woman who fought back. This is Behind the Red Line. Episode 25. The Alicia Walker Case. When a sex worker fights back. On paper, Alan Phelan was the last person you'd expect to end up in a case like this. He'd taught business at Brother Rice High School, a private Catholic school on Chicago's South Side, for nearly 40 years. He coached soccer. He mentored students. He was a familiar face in the building. To his colleagues and students, he was Mr. Phelan, strict, respected, disciplined. But there was another side. Away from the classroom, Phelan used Backpage.com a classified site notorious for escort ads. He booked sex workers. He paid in cash. And according to later testimony, he pushed hard for what he wanted, how he wanted it. That's how he met Alicia Walker. Alicia Walker was 19 at the time of the killing. She grew up in Akron, Ohio. A black girl with 2 birthmarks. One on her leg she covered with a big tattoo that read, "Envy Me." And one on her forehead she hid with bangs and concealer. She'd been teased for how she looked. She'd bounced through hard years. Family instability, poverty, brushes with the system. By her late teens, Alicia was working in the underground economy, doing sex work to survive. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't Pretty Woman. It was anonymous motel rooms, strange men, risk, cash that disappeared as fast as she earned it. She'd already had a prior drug possession case in Chicago and was back in town for a court date in January 2014. To the state, That made her easy to label prostitute from Ohio. To herself, she was a young woman doing what she had to do to stay alive. On January 18th, 2014, Alicia and another worker were booked by a client through Backpage. The man was Alan Phelan. He'd seen Alicia before. This wasn't their first encounter. He agreed to pay $150 each for half an hour with both women. The plan was simple. They'd go to his house, perform the service, get paid, leave. That's how it usually goes. No romance, no connection, just a transaction. But nothing about that night stayed simple. We have two competing stories of what happened inside Alan Phelan's house. Prosecution version. According to prosecutors, Phelan invited the women in. They argued about money, possibly because he felt misled by the ad or by who showed up. And Alicia escalated the argument. They say she grabbed a kitchen knife and attacked him in anger, stabbing him repeatedly during the fight. To them, this was a robbery gone bad, a worker furious about cash, lashing out at a client. Alicia's version. Alicia tells a different story. She says, Phelan demanded unprotected sex, even though they'd agreed otherwise. When they refused, he tried to take back the money he'd already handed over. The fight turned physical. He punched her in the face. He went to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and charged at her. She wrestled with him, managed to grab the knife, and stabbed him while he was attacking and yelling slurs. In her telling, she wasn't the aggressor. She was fighting for her life. Those few chaotic seconds in that kitchen would decide everything that happened next. We're not going to linger on gore. What matters is this. By the time it was over, Phelan had been stabbed multiple times, around a dozen or more wounds, to his neck, abdomen, and arms. Some wounds were deeper, some more superficial, consistent with a frantic struggle, not a silent, calculated execution. Alicia says she panicked, dropped the knife, and ran out of the house. The other woman had already fled. To the law, leaving the scene made her look guilty. To Alicia, running was the only thing keeping her alive. For 3 days, no one knew what had happened inside that suburban home. Phelan didn't show up to Brother Rice. Co-workers called. No answer. Finally, someone requested a welfare check. When police arrived, they found him on the kitchen floor, blood pooled, body cold, a trail of high-heel shoe prints stamped in blood, leading from his body to the front door. The respectable teacher was suddenly the center of a homicide investigation, linked directly to the sex industry. Police traced his phone and messages. They saw the texts to Alicia. Within days, they tracked her to a motel in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and arrested her. She was extradited back to Illinois and charged with first-degree murder. In a videotaped statement, Alicia looked shaken when detectives told her Phelan had died. She told them he hit her first. He grabbed the knife. She struggled, got control of it. She stabbed him in fear and adrenaline. She ran because she was terrified, the judge later said. Her emotional reaction appeared genuine, but still didn't believe her self-defense claim. She was a sex worker. He was a teacher. The scales were tilted before the trial even started. The trial in 2016 lasted only 3 days. On one side, prosecutors painting Phelan as a model citizen, a beloved teacher and coach, a man who'd simply hired a woman for sex and been killed for his money. On the other side, Alicia in a jail jumpsuit framed as a prostitute, manipulative, greedy, the aggressor. The language used about her in court was brutal. The judge called her a prostitute over and over, referring to her work with contempt. He accused her of caring more about protecting her pimp, a man nicknamed Tycoon, than about Phelan's life. He said from the bench, because the kind of people that you deal with when you're a prostitute, you're lucky if you run into an Alan Phelan. Lucky. Lucky if the man who allegedly punches you demands unprotected sex, lunges at you with a knife, is a respectable teacher. The defense argued Phelan started the fight. He attacked when they refused unprotected sex. He tried to take back the money. She grabbed the knife only after he came at her with it. But in a system that criminalizes sex workers, Alicia was never going to be the perfect victim. A jury found her not guilty of first-degree murder, but guilty of second-degree murder, essentially saying, we believe she was provoked, but we don't believe she had the right to kill him. At sentencing, Alicia faced up to 20 years. Judge James Abish settled on 15 years. Before he did, Alicia stood in court and addressed Phelan's family. I had no right to play God, she said. Those words would be replayed in news stories as a confession of guilt, but to some, they sounded like a young woman, forced to apologize for surviving. The judge lectured her about her work, about her choices, about her life. To sex worker advocates watching from the gallery, it felt less like sentencing and more like a public shaming. Alicia was taken away to begin a 15-year sentence for what she still says was self-defense. Outside the courtroom, another story was being told. Groups like Support, HO-SE, and Survived and Punished took up Alicia's case, arguing she had been punished for refusing violence. Articles asked blunt questions. Why is this sex worker in jail for surviving? Advocates pointed out, if sex work were decriminalized, she might have had safer working conditions. She might have been able to leave at the first sign of danger. She might have been believed when she said he attacked her. She might have been framed as a woman defending herself, not a prostitute who should have known better. In interviews from prison, Alicia said, "I'm in here for being a sex worker, even if that's not what I was actually convicted of." She wrote that in a world where sex work wasn't criminalized and stigmatized, she might have been seen as an ordinary woman who, while working, was defending herself from a man who tried to rape and kill her. Instead, she says she was cast as a manipulative whore who deserved punishment. Alicia's case is not unique. Across the U.S., sex workers who defend themselves often find themselves in prison cells instead of hospital beds or safe houses. Why? Because their work is criminalized. Their clients are often seen as more respectable. Juries are biased by stigma. Police treat them as suspects, not victims. And when a sex worker survives violence, by fighting back, the system often responds with, "How dare you?" Alicia's case sits in the same conversation as battered women imprisoned for killing abusive partners. Black women like Marissa Alexander, punished for firing warning shots. Trans women criminalized for survival. Advocates call this pattern criminalizing survival. It's important to say this clearly. Alan Filan was not a faceless villain. He was a longtime teacher, beloved by many students, mourned by his family, remembered warmly by co-workers. He was also a man who regularly purchased sex from young women. A man who, according to Alicia, demanded unsafe sex and became violent when refused. Both truths can exist at once. He could be a good teacher to his students and dangerous to the women he hired. You can mourn his death and still question the system that decided his life was automatically worth more than hers. This case isn't about painting him as a monster or Alicia as a saint. It's about asking, when violence erupts behind closed doors, whose story do we believe? Whose life counts? And what happens when the only witness left is the person the world has already decided to blame? Inside prison, Alicia has continued to speak out. In letters and interviews, she talks about the humiliation of being tried as a prostitute, the trauma of the night with Phelan, the fear she felt when he allegedly came at her with a knife, the way courtroom language stripped her of humanity, her hope for a world where sex work is decriminalized and workers can seek help without being arrested. She imagines a future where brothels are legal and safe, workers can screen clients, there are panic buttons and security staff. Defending yourself doesn't mean 15 years in prison. She writes about missing her family, about watching the seasons change through bars, about how surviving one night locked her into a different kind of violence, the violence of incarceration. On that cold January night in 2014, 3 people walked into a story that none of them would walk out of the same way. A teacher with secrets, 2 young women doing what they had to do, a knife on a kitchen counter. What happened in those few seconds will always be contested. But this much is clear. A man is dead. A young woman is in prison. And the system that placed them in that house together has not changed enough to stop it from happening again. If Alicia Walker had been anyone else, not a sex worker, not poor, not young, not Black Dash, would her claim of self-defense have been heard differently? If sex work weren't criminalized, would she have been safer from the start? The Alicia Walker case forces us to look straight at a brutal question. When a sex worker fights back against violence, do we see a victim defending her life or a criminal stepping out of line? This is Behind the Red Line, Episode 25, The Alicia Walker Case, When a Sex Worker Fights Back.